What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a follow-up to one we did last month with a diesel shop owner who was talking about what it was like to be rated by the EPA and charges that were filed. He's had his sentencing, so he's going to tell us today what he was sentenced to and then everything that progressed from the last episode to this one. So we're really excited and appreciate him reaching out to us to be able to tell his story and update all of you guys. Before we get to it though, want to remind you guys, if you want to save 20% off site-wide and get some really cool gear, Kershaw Knives is a sponsor of the podcast. They have a ton of different things, whether you need something for hunting, fishing, EDC, around the house, or job site. And we appreciate them offering the code to our listeners. So just go to kershaw.kiausa.com and use code diesel20 to get 20% off site-wide. All right, let's get to today's episode with Michael and getting an update on his sentencing from his EPA case. Michael, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. You had told me that, hey, I got an update for you guys. And last episode we did, I know that a lot of people heard it and listened to it. And so I wanted to chat with you today and see what's new or what's transpired since we chatted last week.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do an update. Got, of course, some new information, and now I've gone through the sentencing hearing, and the final kind of chapter there is closed out. So it'd be nice to get some information out there and say, hey, this is what you guys can expect. And now that I have a little more freedom to maybe answer some questions that I had to be a little cautious of last time.
How did that whole process go? What happened with it?
Yeah, so had the final sentencing hearing. Basically, long story short, just like pretty much any of these other cases where they're going through this, you get offered a deal at some point. And we did, myself and the other two business partners were offered the same deal. What I can tell you is one thing that I don't think a lot of people fully understand is that deal is also subjective to the final stamp of that judge. So in my case, for example, the judge added 2 years of probation to the deal. She added 6 months of house arrest and 180 hours of community service.
Wow.
So in the full scope of things, we're looking at 5 years probation, 6 months house arrest, 180 hours community service, plus, $66K in fines, which should be all public knowledge. You should be able to look this up on the case. I don't know if the EPA has published it, but it should all be there.
Wow. So that, I didn't know that. And it's so hard to get information on this kind of stuff. Like we chatted about before,
Sure.
It's like normally you just see, an update online or something. I think they do publish, some of the things. So that's really interesting. So like overall, how did it go the way that you had hoped or what were your thoughts? What are your thoughts now looking back on it?
Well, I can tell you, so now that, like I said, I have a little more freedom to say, it somewhat went the way I was kind of expecting. What I can tell you is, in the sense that there is a law, right, that we have to basically not violate, it's very black and white. People might be upset about me saying that or saying, hey, but the truth is it's black and white. There's a law. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree. But if you don't agree, the best analogy I can say is this is like you speeding on the highway, right? Highway says, hey, it's 65. You go 75 because you don't agree. It should be 65. You get pulled over, you get a ticket, you get pissed off at the cop and say, hey, this is, I don't agree with this. Well, that's nice. It's still a law. You broke it. Here's the consequence. But we can get into the other side of things, right? As auto enthusiasts, as motorsports enthusiasts, obviously we don't necessarily agree with the way things are going, right? There's lots of stuff. I mean, there's rumors out there from all kinds of stuff, politicians being involved on different sides of things, not just the EPA side, but on, the side of owning certain businesses. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors, right? I can tell you from my own personal experience, what I can tell you is, it's interesting that the way they play it. In the public side of the case, I'm not sure how, but you should be able to look up transcripts from the court case. So this should all be public knowledge. The U.S. attorney prosecutor straight up said that, while they're making their case to the judge, the term was used, I quote, most of these deleted trucks are driven on highways near low income communities, predominantly for people of color. Okay, so now we get into a whole nother thing, right? I mean, this isn't something I made up. I mean, like I said, the transcripts should be available. I don't know how to look them up, but this was on the public side of the hearing, right? So this wasn't the sealed side. So this is where we start getting into more of the gray area of like, okay, this is really what's going on, right? They're going to do whatever they can to make this happen. My attorney pushed for 0 time. The probation officer pushed for 0 time. They said, look, there's been no cases out there where people have served any sort of jail time. Per the judge's words, we are going to start making examples out of cases like this because obviously people haven't got it. And that's when the 6 months of house arrest, adding the 2 years probation, and 180 hours of community service came in. By the way, let's also add that the minimum for the classification of this felony, assuming you don't have any credit for cooperation, assuming you don't have any credit for doing anything, the minimum for this classification of felony is recommended at 10 months by the U.S. Attorney's Office behind bars.
Wow.
So that's the minimum recommendation plus whatever fines, right? Now, of course, this is where we come into the judge has the final say on this thing, okay? But this is where you start having to look at it, right? I mean, people, it's easy for people to say stuff, right? They've maybe gone through this stuff on the civil side, but when it used to be nothing but civil, or people enthusiasts of different backgrounds, whether they're a mechanic, whether they're a shop owner that hasn't gone through this, whether they're a customer, right? It's easy for them to say stuff. But here's the thing that I have to now look at, right? Now I've got 6 months where my life is work, home. That's the only 2 options I got, right? And I'm getting put in the same classification as somebody that got busted for dealing drugs or weapons or, violent crimes over the exhaust systems, right? Over the violating the Clean Air Act, over this stuff, right? So this is the severity of it, right? And this is, I guess, I tried to portray this a little bit more in a politically correct format before. We don't have to agree with it, but there's a way to go about fighting it. Getting involved in politics, getting involved in everything that we can as enthusiasts, where we're all stepping up and we're saying, hey, what's going on isn't right. What we don't like the fact that this is going on. Okay, then we have to change the law, right? Simply violating the law doesn't change anything.
Right.
It creates situations like mine where, I got to rely on, I believe I can go to the grocery store and medical necessities for myself and, family members. And I haven't had the actual probation meeting. So there may be other freedoms that are allotted, but you got to think about that. I mean, 600 months of house arrest, right? I mean, like I said, it's the same classification as somebody that was dealing drugs. And that affects my life. It doesn't affect the customer that we installed. The fines that are based off of a gross amount, and they have some formula that they take this and that, and they do all these calculations and yada yada. Okay, well that's fine, but truly, by the time you break it down, you really didn't make much money, and you're usually paying far more than you made in a lot of cases now. I know early days, civil stuff was totally different, but now when you break down what an individual is responsible for, not a business, an individual, I mean, it's a whole different ballgame now.
I saw a comment on YouTube on I believe it was your episode, but somebody had said, well, the EPA can't make laws and can't enforce fines. And what you're telling me right now is the complete opposite in reality. And I think that's the part that I just wish, I hope people listen and they understand that there are real repercussions. And what you just mentioned that you're dealing with, it's not just, you go into some meetings, get a letter in the mail, you got to change your business, and that's it. Like, it's real stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I mean, going back on that is, I think the problem is the EPA. So many people look at the EPA as just like a government body that has suggestions of how to do emissions, right? Yep. That's not the case. I mean, they are a governing body. They can propose stuff. They're right. They can't change laws. But when all this stuff gets voted on, and when all this stuff gets passed through and nobody's paying attention because it's snuck into, this bill or that bill and all this stuff. And like I said, the corruptness or however you want to put it, the stuff that's going on. I mean, look at the stuff, my wife almost lost it when the U.S. attorney prosecutor made that comment, right? Like, what does that have to do with that, right? And I have, that's the thing. And then they want to bring up cancer, they want to bring up, asthma, and try to make this thing sound so severe that you're killing people by doing these deletes. I mean, this is the image that they portray, okay? And quite frankly, I brought up to the judge, I said, okay, great. Well, you want to talk about cancer? My dad has stage 4 cancer that he's fighting right now. Okay, great. My son was a study case for one of the top children's hospitals in Washington, D.C. because of the severity of his asthma. You really think that I wanted to hurt them? You really think that was my intention? And I got told by the judge, basically, look, your personal matters don't matter, right? That's not the point, right? So on one side, we're being told they're bringing up and trying to make this personal, right? On one side, saying, hey, this is how personal it is because you're killing people, and these soot, it settles in people's lungs, and we have all these studies and this and that. But then when I brought up, hey, okay, that's nice, but what about the studies that were done that the EPA, their own mechanic, when they rated us, by the way, which I have the other business owners can attest to this, admitted that these systems fail. Okay, so how much of this pollution is being done by systems that are failing? Not even deletes, right? Because you look at a vast majority of trucks, and you're not talking a vast majority of trucks, but they've got all these crazy numbers that each truck that's deleted, it's 1 million tons worth of soot that gets deposited over the lifetime of the vehicle. So we have to factor that, and they're going off the assumption of these vehicles are on the road for X amount of years. They're driven in this environment, that environment. Oh, in Alaska, they're idled all the time because they're cold, in the cold in the wintertime. So they're running all the time. And then we're driven on the highways. Well, we all know the fact of the matter is most trucks that stay on the highways don't have the problems. It's the trucks that are stop and go, that don't get work, that don't, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
you're talking a small majority of these trucks that are actually having these issues. And so when they bring this up and they start trying to hit you on all this, they make it personal, right? They try to make it personal. They try to make you sound like a criminal. Like I said, I mean, it is literally, the stuff that was being said was, to me, was like, oh, okay. That's how we're going about this. Okay. So it's like I said, I mean, yeah, the EPA can't enforce laws necessarily. They can't create laws, but they can make the proposal to pass them through. And then while we're all sleeping, because it got snuck into whatever bill, it gets passed. Yeah, they may not be able to necessarily enforce it, but they can come in, they can do the investigation, and they can turn everything over. They do have the power to do investigations and to turn it over to the U.S. attorney. And then the U.S. attorney looks at it purely from an aspect of, once again, what is your relation to violating this law? They don't care about the personal stuff. They don't look, you violated a law. That's what it comes down to. That's all the U.S. attorney and all the judge looks at.
Wow, this is there's a lot here, and I think that was one of the main takeaways from our last episode when we chatted, was just how the EPA, the government, the courts look at this particular issue, and it made a lot of sense the way you described it. But I guess to hear how it's progressed through sentencing and the kind of aftermath of it it's almost shocking, I guess it would be the word I would use for it. Is shocking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just it, right? And I think the last episode I brought up, hey, all these other potential issues, right?
Yeah.
But now it gets even more real. Okay, now it gets into the fact of, well, now you're putting extra strain on your family because you're on house arrest, right? So here's the reality, right? In a lot of cases, is that going to affect a lot of things? Well, possibly not, right? There's, I got a good wife. We can work around that. The kids, I mean, so what? We have some movie nights at home with the kids now instead, for about 6 months. It's going into winter time up here anyway. So we're not going out fishing and camping and stuff anyways, right? But there is stuff that you got to think about with that, right? Things that we take for granted that people don't think about. Okay, what about, the fact that me and my wife try to go on a weekly date, right? And here's the thing. I mean, we don't necessarily go out and spend a bunch of money. Sometimes it's free, right? Sometimes it's a walk on a beach. Sometimes it's whatever. But I'm not doing that for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm not doing any of this stuff for the next 6 months. Hey, late at night, oh, let me run to the store to get the kids a gallon of milk for cereal in the morning. Or, me and the wife are watching a movie and, oh, we really want some snacks at 1 o'clock in the morning. Let's run up to the store that's a mile away and go, grab some snacks. Yeah, that's not happening. Right. I mean, there's all this other stuff that affects your personal life now that, like I said, I mean, it's really easy for everybody to have an opinion until they live it.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it is, you know, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of stuff. Even when I talked to my father about the situation after the court case, and he's like, well, he gets riled up. He's an older gentleman, so of course, he's really into politics, and he's getting all riled up. But I said, but what does that do? What are you fighting right now? Right? We have to fight to change the law. We have to fight to change the way these things are operated. Fighting because we don't agree with something that was said, right? Even in the courtroom, like doesn't really make a difference. Fighting because we don't agree with the law, it doesn't make a difference. You have to change the law itself. You have to change everything at its core.
Yeah.
We have to find ways to adapt. We have to find ways to work around the laws that are there, and not just say, okay, well, I don't like this, so I'm gonna violate this. As a customer, well, I think it's dumb, because I want to do whatever I want with my truck. Great. So what are you doing to change the law? Because like I said, going back to the speed limit thing, you don't agree with driving 65 on the freeway or 55 because you're like, oh man, this is really slow. Okay, what are you doing to change it other than complaining?
That's really the key. And that's, I think, the power of what you're saying about this whole situation. It's true. And it's really the question I ask, the industry or myself or, with anything pertaining to this is what are we doing? And I know there's some things with the RPM Act and other stuff, but specifically,
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about race vehicles in this application. We're not talking about the ability to take an old truck and, race it. We're talking about how your life's affected a bunch of other people. And that's really the key is what, how are we getting involved in the process? Are we talking about it? Are we, talking with our representatives? What are we actually doing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, it's exactly that, and that's the thing. I mean, we can go back and forth, right? There's always this political divide about this president, this party, that party. But okay, look at what's been going on with the EPA, right? It's been going on through multiple different presidencies, right? It's been going on. I don't care what side of the fence you're on, what politics you believe in. It's been going on through presidents that sat on both sides of the political party, right? I mean, so it really doesn't make a difference. Like it's not necessarily about, okay, well, if I do this right, like, what are we doing to prevent this stuff? And it goes, I mean, even deeper. We just got notification. I mean, most manufacturers are getting away from V8s of any kind, right? Chrysler, Dodge, they've been one of the big ones that's like trying to fight till the very end. We finally got that notification, that not long ago they're done. Next year's it. There's no more V8s, So what are we doing to change that, right? Like, you either adapt and you work with the guidelines you're given, or you work to change it. But what I see so much of is everybody wants to have an opinion and say, which is fine. We're all entitled to our opinion. But when you get so flustered and uppity and say, well, I don't agree with this, so I'm not going to follow that. Okay, well, there's consequences for that, right? When the judge asked me, she said, well, why did you do it? Right? That was a question I got asked. Why did you do it? My intent wasn't to add to cancer, right? My intent wasn't to add to asthma. Like I said, I have a personal connection with that stuff. Everything this prosecutor's bringing up, I said, I don't think they know anything about that. I said, they want to bring this up and use this against me. So they have no idea, more than likely what they're even talking about. And you could tell even when they're bringing it up and the way they went about it, tried to describe a tuning device and a this, the that, and the other, they don't know what they're talking about. But it goes back to that core. Was a law violated? And like I said, the judge asked me, why did you do this? Well, this wasn't my intent to do all of this, but we all have a passion, right? right? We all have, and quite frankly, like I said before, I probably lost money just on the delete side of things over the years. I guarantee you we lost money, right? But it wasn't about doing deletes. It wasn't about trying to violate a law. It was the community, right? And at the time, this is just what people did, right? There was no real explanation of, okay, well, the emissions doesn't work, so we yank it off. That's what we're doing, right? There was no real progression. It was just, hey, we're just gonna scrap this and we're gonna be done. Like that's the mindset that diesel industries had for years.
Yeah.
And obviously that was the wrong one to have, as we can tell, So
It's really interesting because sometimes covering this topic, we catch, flack for it too. And it'll be maybe not necessarily public, but places have said or people have said, why are you talking about this? Why are you having people on to discuss this? This isn't what we want to portray. We don't want this out in front of people. And I'm like, we need to have it in front of people because
Right.
it is affecting every single, it's not just affecting you. It's affecting what's on website, which I've looked at tons of different ones. There used to be pages and pages and pages of parts, and now it's down to one or two. So it's affected what, as a truck owner, you can buy. And it's also, it's just a current topic. Before the podcast, you said, man, that last episode we did, it riled some people up. So that's why I wanted to kind of segue into that is what kind of feedback did you have, after we chatted, the episode was out there, what did you hear?
I haven't heard a whole lot. I heard rumors from a couple different sources actually telling me that people were pissed off because I tried to make the issue very black and white, right? I was told that it's dealing with the EPA is in black and white. Navigating a court case, I guess, is never as black and white as we'd hope, especially in the current environment that we live in. But it is black and white, like I said, in the sense of it's a law, right? And that was kind of the thing, is that people got riled up, right? I heard feedback about, yeah, this is, I totally agree with you, but this is really messed up what they're doing. Yeah, it is. Like you said, I mean, we allowed stuff to happen. Nobody cared to pay attention until it was too late, right? I mean, when you really think about it, this was a civil case, right? Like when H&S, for those that remember H&S, right, when they were one of the first to go through this, or even Edge, right? Like Edge was doing delete tuners. People forget that. Like I think 08, 09, right? Some of these companies were the first to go through this, and nobody paid attention other than saying, well, this sucks, we're just going to find a way around it, right? Like that was everybody's mindset. We're going to find a way to skirt the law. So we get to this point where finally in 2020, the government says, okay, enough is enough. Civil fines aren't working. Hitting people with penalties are not working. So now we're going to make it a criminal offense. And, from my understanding, and actually from what they said, I'm one of the first to actually be convicted under the new criminal case, right? Like there might be a couple, but you're talking like a couple, literally, if there is 2 to 3, maybe, so this is the first time that we're starting to hear about people getting more than fines. And I don't think it's going to stop here. I think that you're going to see more and more of this, of people, and I think that we're going to, at some point, see people behind bars for this.
Yeah, it's definitely progressed, and that's why, with our last episode, I really took it to heart what you were saying, and really thought about it, and then connecting today just to hear, how did this, finally come to an end, and what, just the takeaway from it, I think, is really important, and that's why it's great to have you on the podcast to talk about this, and to state it. And I know there were a ton of people that were like, oh, well, let us know, have them come back on and update everything and everything. Yeah. So it was it was really cool to be able to chat with you again. And I think the message and what you're talking about is very important. We all need to think about that, and just understand this stuff has real consequences. It's not, like you said, it's not just the fine anymore. It's an actual penalty.
Right. No, and it is. And I mean, it sucks. I mean, I didn't think growing up that I would ever see a time where, people in the automotive industry who are passionate about something are going to end up with jail time for something they're passionate about, right? Like, I mean, that's the argument that's being made, is like freedoms are being taken away, right? But it's the whole, here's the thing. People can be as pissed as they want, but if we're not changing it, what are we doing? And it's not just the US, right? Like, people want to get so riled up. You know how many other countries have already done this? And it's similar, right? Like, my wife's from Norway, for example. So out of curiosity's sake, we went on a road trip, and she starts looking up the laws over there, right? And it's very similar, like with the fines and how severe it is. And you're talking about a country that for murder gets 8 years. Like, that's their max for murder, or it was for a long time. And they're talking about increasing it from 2 to 3 years of jail time for violating basically emissions laws, right? So you're getting darn near half the time for an emissions violation that you are a murder in this country, like, over there.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the severity of it, and this is how serious they're taking it, and this isn't just the US. I mean, it is a worldwide attack on, emissions, climate change, whatever you want to throw it into that category. But the automotive enthusiasts are the ones that are catching the brunt of this.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, we can argue about the in between stuff, right? But this is so new that even, like, in my case, the U.S. Attorney's Office didn't have cases to reference to say to the judge, hey, in this case or that case, this is what happened. They were referencing cases, EPA cases, where people had spilt drums of chemicals, right? Trying to relate that to what we're doing. So it's so new that we're still on that forefront of, like, this is going to snowball very quickly, right? Like, they're setting the precedent right now. Hey, the first couple guys are going to get X, right? And they're going to keep increasing this. On one hand, it kind of sucks that I was one of the first because, well, they're going to try and make an example. On the other hand, I was kind of lucky in a sense of, like, as these cases go on and they say, okay, well, so-and-so got busted for X, Y, and Z. Well, this guy did 10 times the amount and he got 6 months. Okay, so now, well, you're going to spend 18 months behind bars because you did 10 times the amount the guy that got 6 months house arrest, right? Like, that's the progression that we're going to see here.
That's very true. That's a good point. It was great to chat with you. I wish it was under different circumstances that we had recorded a podcast. But,
sure.
But I think the insights and the things you're talking about, everyone we can just identify with it, whether we're a truck enthusiast, a shop owner, a company that's out there. Just, I had people listen to this episode that they're not even into diesels. They're not even into automotive. They just found the topic really interesting. And so I appreciate you coming back on. Appreciate you reaching out, Michael, and, telling us what you did, spreading the message, that you are. And we wish you the best. Hope that, things go well, and anything we can ever do to help you or chat about or anything like that. And you're always more than welcome back on the podcast.
Absolutely. Awesome. Appreciate the time, Patrick.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kiausa.com. Use code diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. They got a ton of cool things there, whether you need something for the outdoors, everyday carry at home, and really products to meet any budget. So there's something there for everybody. Make sure and take advantage of it. Also want to encourage you guys, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Turn on notifications, like and comment. It helps these episodes reach new diesel truck owners or people who are looking to have problems solved. They can't find the answer. This will pop up for them. So we really appreciate that. And then also all of our Patreons that have helped us grow throughout the years, support us. I want to give a shout out to Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, Kaleb, all of our Patreons, all of you who subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the podcast apps. You guys keep us going and keep the creativity going with ways to bring you guys different stories, the information that you want. Our Discord is huge. It's grown tremendously. So we just wanted to say thank you to all of you out there. We appreciate your support. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.